Good morning. I'm Glen Vries, President, co-founder of Medidata. Thank you so much for coming today. And I would like to tell you a little bit more about how Medidata is thinking about our industry and what we are working on. I think very importantly, we all share a common mission. Medidata is a company that was founded by people like me who worked in clinical research. All of us in the room share one common purpose: get new drugs to the patients who are waiting for them, get new devices to patients who are waiting for them, improve the quality of healthcare in South Korea and around the world. And most of the time, when we are improving the quality of patients' lives, we are doing that by delivering more precise therapies than what we've had in the past. Figure out how we can match the right treatment at the right time with the right patient. That's a wonderful thing for patients. But it also is an interesting challenge for all of us in life sciences. If we're looking for more precise therapies, that means that we're looking for therapies for smaller and smaller populations of patients, both when those patients are taking our drugs commercially, but also in research. If we're looking for more precise definitions of patients, it means that our research projects are getting more complicated. We have more things about patients that we want to measure, both to identify the right patients and to determine how good their outcomes are. And the more things that we measure, the more data that we have. The more data that we have, the more complicated it is to be a data manager, or to be in clinical operations, or be a statistician. So we have to handle this abundance, this large amount of data. So how does Medidata do this with you? We do this in 3 different ways. The first, which I think many of you are at least familiar with parts of, is what we do in Medidata Rave. The Rave family of products is about executing on the science of research. When we are making new therapies, we have to conduct experiments to determine their safety and efficacy, and that requires all different kinds of data. That is what Rave is focused on, that scientific process. But research projects are projects, and all projects, whether they're scientific or not, have limits on resources. They have limits on money. They have limits on people. They have limits on time. And so we have to think about timelines and budgets at the same time as we're thinking about science. And that is what the Edge family of products on the Medidata platform delivers. There's a third thing that we help you with at Medidata. Research is important. That's how we develop new therapies. We come up with new innovative ideas in the laboratory, and we bring them to the point that regulators have approved them. But once a regulator has approved a new product, that still isn't delivering value for the patient. We have to get somebody to prescribe that drug, to give the patient that device, and then it needs to be paid for. That is the aspect of commercial that is so important for delivering patient value, and that is what we now have on the Medidata platform in the Shift family of products. Shift is a company that Medidata acquired relatively recently, and the same way the Medidata platform to date has been about research, about investigators, for example, the Shift platform is about providers, is about doctors in real-world practice. The same way the Medidata platform is about subjects, patients who are volunteering to be in clinical trials. The Shift platform is about patients who are consumers, who are taking drugs in the commercial part of their life cycle. And together, now the Medidata platform is really able to close the loop on the entire process of the full life cycle of a new therapy. Can we connect research data and real-world data? Yes. Can we think about costs and return on investment in research and in our go-to-market commercial strategies? Yes. Can we think about actually delivering to the world of healthcare more precise medicines, more precise therapies where the right patient gets the right drug at the right time? And the answer is yes, we can. We do that on the Medidata platform with Rave and with Edge and with Shift. And all of them focus on getting the maximum value from data and analytics, data and artificial intelligence. On the Medidata platform, we can take all of the different types of data that you see on one side of the slide and turn that into unique scientific and business insights that can help the companies in this room become some of the most successful life sciences companies in the world. The Medidata platform is a single platform for the full life sciences process. That is the highest level of what we are trying to deliver. Let me now take that down one step and think about some of the jobs that people in the room do today. Many of you work in data management. Before we started Medidata, I was a research scientist. I also did some data management. So I know what your jobs are like. You have so many different kinds of data that need to come together. Of course, EDC is something that Medidata Rave is, I think, probably has the longest history in. And things really still do start with electronic data capture. It's an incredibly important part of almost every clinical trial that we still run in the world today. I will point out that doing EDC well is not easy. And we have spent almost 20 years getting very, very good at it. We have a system in Rave where it can deal with the most complicated clinical trials, scale up, but also work well in the simplest, smallest clinical trials, scale down. Having one solution that does both of those is a hallmark of how we think about our Medidata platform. And we go beyond just thinking about electronic data capture. As you'll see in the presentation today, I'll give you some examples. Later this morning, David Lee, our Chief Data Officer, will give you some more examples. It's not just getting the data in, but it's how we apply new artificial intelligence technologies to get the most value out of that data. How we think about natural language processing and machine learning and build that into EDC processes. And of course, electronic data capture isn't just data that we're capturing from doctors and nurses and coordinators at sites. It includes things like medical images. We now have on the Medidata platform the ability to ingest the actual medical images from your research studies, to manage the whole image adjudication process with those images, and then all of the imaging data winds up in the same database as your lab data, as your EDC data, again, all on one platform. This is something that can simplify the integration and the reconciliation that everybody in the room who is a data manager has to deal with every day. And clinical trials today aren't just lab data and site data and images. Increasingly, we're looking at things that require complex therapies. We have to deal with data related to the drugs themselves. Randomization and trial supply management is just as much a part of how you work with Medidata as EDC itself. This actually is not just valuable for the data manager in terms of not having to deal with reconciliation and biostatisticians having to look at multiple data sets. They can look at all together, but it's tremendously valuable for the sites, for the doctors, nurses, and coordinators. They can just go to one place and deal with everything related to the clinical trial. Many of those samples that are being taken in clinical trials today, and we know an increasing number, will also be used for new kinds of data generation, not just traditional biochemistry, traditional physiology, but the world of research is pointing to the fact that genomics and proteomics are becoming essential things to understand if we really want to deliver those ultra-high value precision therapies. This is a screenshot of our omics module for the ingestion of genomic data and proteomic data. Looks a lot like Ray VDC because it is the same process. It is electronically capturing data, just in this case, next generation sequence data, not clinic data. And just as I said with clinic data, you get the data in, but then we want to apply the most advanced analytics and artificial intelligence. Raveomics is no different. As data is ingested into our omics module, we provide you with machine learning-based capabilities so that data can automatically be explored. So we can help you discover new biomarkers that are related to what patients are responding or not responding to your therapy, what patient groups might have a higher prevalence of certain adverse events. These are things that require new technologies to explore with this much data and tremendous scale. Again, the Medidata Rave family of products provides all of these capabilities on one unified clinical platform. These are all things that doctors, nurses, laboratory technicians, scientists interact with. But there's another group of people who are incredibly important in research. And of course, those people are the patients themselves, the volunteers who are coming into clinical trials. And not only does the Medidata platform provide one place that all of the healthcare professionals who work in research can go to, but we provide one place where all of the patients who are volunteering for research projects can go to. The world of healthcare is changing. Outside of research, more and more patients are interacting around the world with software, with physicians interactively, virtually. Our job in this room as life scientists is to provide the best, most valuable therapies to the world of healthcare. So if the world of healthcare is changing and patients are being interacted with through more technology and in more virtual settings, we as the life sciences industry, we need to be ready for that. In fact, not only do we need to be ready for that, we can use that to create even more value in terms of identifying those patients and getting better data from them. And that is what the Medidata platform is about from a patient perspective. We have everything on the Medidata platform that a patient in a research project needs, including, of course, patient-reported outcomes. So the patient can use their Android phone or their iOS phone and fill out their quality of life questionnaires. But they can also do things like filling out their medications while they are taking those medications, instead of waiting for a coordinator to fill those out in the clinic in a more traditional type of clinical trial. That's how we bring the clinical trial to the patient in their home. More and more, we're seeing sensor data being incorporated into clinical trials. Heart rate sensors, sleep quality, activity. All of these things are starting to provide objective views of quality of life that can be used to supplement what we see in more traditional patient-reported outcome instruments. Now, collecting data from patients is an incredibly important part of a clinical trial. But there are things that we do with patients even before they start to participate in the clinical trial. And that's where I want to talk about some of our capabilities, not just around data capture, but around the electronic management of consent, e-consent. I know that's going to be a topic today. Electronic signatures in clinical trials is still not something that is widely accepted in South Korea. It is something that we at Medidata have experience with in other parts of the world. And I think it is an incredibly transformational potential technology globally, certainly here. Consent is the signature on the piece of paper. And electronic consent can certainly help sites, help all of us, track all those pieces of paper, make sure that they're all filled out correctly. But the act of providing consent from a patient isn't about the signature. It's about their process, what they think about, their education about the clinical trial leading up to the signature. And Medidata Enroll is about education and consent, both. So the patient learns about the trial in an interactive experience with multimedia, understands their responsibilities, and in the most informed way, which is really what our mission is, gives their consent to be part of the trial. And not only does the patient's engagement in that way important in consent, it's important throughout the whole duration of the trial. And that's what Medidata Engage is about. As I said before, healthcare is changing. The way patients interact with doctors and nurses and take care of themselves is changing around the world. Medidata Engage is about bringing that change into our clinical trials as well. Can we interact with the patient in their home? Can we get data from them without having to transport them to a site to create certainly cost efficiencies, certainly time efficiencies, but importantly, an even better experience for that patient? The subjects in your clinical trials are going to be just like your customers when your drug is in its commercial phase. And so this is a great time to think about how we interact with them. In fact, we can do clinical trials today without ever bringing the patient to a clinic. Adaptable is an example of that. This is a clinical trial that we're running in the United States right now. It is, we think, the largest virtual trial being done anywhere in the world. What do I mean by virtual trial? I mean that at no point does the patient actually have to physically go to see an investigator. There's still investigator supervision. It looks just like a traditional clinical trial, except the patients are identified from their electronic health records as potential candidates for the study. Once a patient is identified as a potential candidate for the study, they are educated with Rave and Roll in terms of what the study means for them. This is a study that's about long-term cardiac effects depending on the dosage of aspirin that patients take. This is actually a very important study, I think, in terms of the societal value. This could have tremendous impact on the healthcare of aging populations and the cost of it. But all of that value can be realized by, again, informing the patients at home that they are eligible for the trial, consenting them. We can even virtually deliver drug to patients. And then all of the data capture happens through remote devices in the patient's home. As I said, it's the largest, we think, in the world. There's about 7,500 patients enrolled now. It'll be about 15,000 patients by the time it's done. And this is what I would call a 100% virtual trial. And all the interactions are through technology. I do not think that all clinical trials will be 100% virtual. In fact, I think very few trials will be 100% virtual. But most of the trials that are being done by people in this room today are 0% virtual. They're mostly done or entirely done in clinic. And what we need to prepare for as an industry, what we should be doing as an industry, is figuring out how to take things that are currently 0% virtual and not take them all the way to 100%. But this is a picture of a dial. Imagine your hand is on this. And depending on the complexity of your therapeutic, depending on the severity of the disease, depending on the condition of the patient, their demographics, we can decide how to run a trial. Do we want to make it 80% virtual because it's a relatively simple condition? Maybe it's diabetes. Patients aren't that sick where they have to come to the clinic every week. And we can run this trial, bring them in for a baseline visit, bring them in at some point in the trial to check on them, deliver their medication to their home, take references from their blood glucose, from a device that they're wearing, and at the end of the trial, close them out. I say 80% virtual. Maybe if we were planning in a traditional way 5 visits, 4 of the 5 can be virtual. That's one example. Maybe we need to turn the dial back even more. Maybe it's a complicated therapeutic area. There's an infusion therapy. Maybe the patients are very sick. Maybe they have a stage 3, stage 4 cancer. And we want them to come to the clinic. We need them to come to the clinic. But do we need them to come for all 5 out of 5 of their planned visits in the study? Maybe there's a visit where we're just checking on concomitant medications. We can do that with the app on their phone. Maybe we're just checking their vital signs. We can do that in home or with devices that are Internet of Things connected. So I think that we'll see many studies, probably in 5 years, almost every study being done by people in this room will be either 20% virtual or 80% virtual. And our hope at Medidata is we are providing you with the platform today so you will be able to turn that dial to whatever it is that you need. Let me move on to clinical operations. Many of you work in clinical operations or are monitors. When I used to work in academic research, I was the data manager, and I was the statistician, and I was the clinical operator. So I understand those jobs too. Clinical operations job is to make sure that we deal with all of those limited resources and we run a good study, a compliant study. And the same way that the Medidata platform provides everything that data managers need, the Medidata platform provides, in the Edge family of products, everything that clinical operations professionals need. Of course, that includes CTMS. Edge has full CTMS capabilities. You can look at your milestones, you can look at your resources, you can look at your vendors. Except, unlike a traditional CTMS, Edge is completely connected to Rave. So you don't have to re-enter data in both CTMS and EDC. Information around source document verification and monitoring that you did in Rave feeds directly into Edge. There's master data management across both platforms. There's one place for the clinical operations professionals, for monitors to log in. And of course, it includes complete functionality to deal with site monitoring from a traditional perspective, planning visits, templates for letters, approvals and tracking of visit reports. But it also provides capabilities for the newest kinds of monitoring that we're seeing, for central monitoring. Planning a study where we are not going to do exhaustive source document verification. Planning a study where we are going to comply with ICH E6 R2 requirements for risk-based monitoring. Right? Recently, South Korea has decided to become part of ICH harmonization. So this is incredibly important in this market right now. Being able to run a central monitoring function in the same platform that you're doing traditional monitoring. It's just like the virtual trial dial. Here we can dial between traditional monitoring and risk-based monitoring to whatever degree we need to. And not only do we have the capabilities to handle the planning and execution of these risk-based monitoring studies, but in the Medidata platform, we now have complete capabilities to plan and manage risk in the study itself. Again, an incredibly important part of ICH E6R2. Many companies who are implementing RBM, who are implementing compliance with ICH E6R2, are doing things like risk planning and management on spreadsheets and software that's not made specifically for doing this. In the Medidata platform, we have a risk management module to create your risk mitigation plans and actually connect them to the data, to the metrics, to the KPIs, to the site information related to managing those risks during the study. Again, this is about master data management. This is about integrated systems and making the work of the ClinOps professional, making the monitor's full day that much more efficient. By adding a little software, we can make clinical operations much more productive in their full day. And of course, clinical trials aren't just about data in. You have to ultimately get that data out. And that is what is an Edge eTMF. Our electronic trial master file is integrated with the rest of the Medidata platform the same way everything else, excuse me, I've been talking about is. There's master data management. There's integration. There's one place to log in. Edge eTMF rounds out all of our documentation needs on the same platform. So now, we've got the science of research, we've got the business of research, and we get to the point that our drug is approved. Excuse me. This is where having one platform for commercial comes into play. As I said, once we deliver a drug to the marketplace, we need patients to take it to get value. And that is what having the best go-to-market plan and managing that go-to-market plan is about. This is a picture of the analytics that we have for planning go-to-market, for watching your sales force, for looking at CRM data, looking at prescription data, looking at reimbursement data, now all on the same platform as the research processes that got us to this point. If patients are taking our drugs, we need to know in the real world, are the drugs safe and effective? And the Shift platform also gives us the capabilities to take real-world data and turn that into real-world evidence, looking at safety and efficacy. This is the ultimate realization of that closed loop between clinical and commercial. And as I said about patients, we now have relationships with patients in new ways that we didn't have before. We're engaging them in clinical trials in ways that we haven't engaged them before. And we need to do that in commercial as well. In the Shift platform, we have a patient-based CRM system. So we can manage relationships with patients who are consumers, not just patients who are clinical trial subjects. And all of this is delivered on top of a platform about real-world data, third-party data, ingestion, and integration. The Shift platform is really EDC for the real world. All the prescription data, reimbursement data, EMR data, integrated in one place so we can look at it in new ways. You can integrate it even into your own data warehouses and internal processes. The Shift platform does for commercial what the Medidata platform does for research. Now all that data is in one place. Now, data analytics, as I mentioned before, is an incredibly important part of what we do on our platform. Data and analytics is terrific for optimization. Can I make that monitor 1% more efficient? Can I make this data management process 10% cheaper? But what we see with the next generation of machine learning, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, is that sometimes we don't just need to optimize. We can start fresh. We can reinvent the way we think about processes. We can transform and revolutionize things. And that is what we're doing on the Medidata platform. We are providing one place where you can, with all of this data across the life sciences enterprise, think about data and artificial intelligence. And it manifests itself in all the different things I was talking about before. Here's a great example. Concomitant medication and adverse event coding. All of us who have worked in clinical trials know how important this is. How do we take all those verbatim terms and turn them into something that is against a dictionary of terms for AEs or ConMeds? This is a process that at Medidata, our data science team was able to invent an algorithm, a machine learning algorithm, train it with clinical trial data, validate it with clinical trial data, and that algorithm is now available as part of RAVE. So as your verbatim terms are going into RAVE EDC, they can be coded by a machine. Now, if you're a coder, you're the coding department, you still have a job. But instead of coding everything, you now can code by exception. We can make you more efficient. And we can take these AAs and ConMeds and consistently code them in ways that they can easily be used, not just within one clinical trial or within one drug submission, but as you'll hear David talk about later this morning, across our whole industry. Really getting more value out of the data that we're capturing. You'll hear more about this as well. We are trying to take the data that is flowing through your clinical trials and help you collaborate with other companies. This has been a dream of the life sciences world for decades. Only now do we have the scale and breadth of the Medidata platform, the customer base in South Korea, around the world, to bring this data together to help use technology to enable that collaboration. We presented this at ASCO 2 years ago. We presented more at ASCO just a couple months ago. And again, you'll hear more about it today. I do want to touch on one of my favorite pieces of machine learning in our platform, and that is called CSA, Centralized Statistical Analytics. So this is a picture of lots of different clinical trial data. This is what I used to think about all day when I was running my own clinical trials. Machine learning is really about pattern recognition. What are the patterns that occur in different types of data? And what you are seeing here is CSA exhaustively looking through all of the data in a clinical trial and identifying all of those patterns. You can see them in blue. You can also see some things flagged in red. And if I zoom into one of those pictures, what CSA is doing as a way to help and guide a data manager, a statistician, even, I'll give you an example, a clinical operations professional, is it is looking for outliers, not just single data point outliers, but outliers in many dimensions, including what data came from one site versus another site. So circled in red, you see data from a particular site that looks very different from the data in other parts of this particular clinical trial. If you are a monitor, that is probably the site that you want to go monitor before you monitor anywhere else in a risk-based monitoring program. So here you see machine learning directly influencing the decisions that a monitor would make every day. And David will give you some examples of how CSA has not just helped to transform the way some of our clients think about data, excuse me, but actually affected their ability to go to market and get their drugs approved more quickly. And that is really, in summary, how we want you to think about the Medidata platform. If you think about the totality of RAVE and of EDGE and of SHIFT, in different aspects of a life sciences company, in different departments, it really is just delivering the same three things. Accelerated value. Can I do my monitoring visit faster? Can I reconcile two data sets faster? Can I lock my database faster? Can I have my drug approved more quickly? Can I reach peak revenue faster? Accelerate the business of life sciences. Number two is mitigate risk. Can I design a great trial using real-world data? Can I make sure that I'm seeing a great response with my drug using synthetic control arms? Can I use things like genomics to figure out what patients might have a high risk for certain types of adverse events and exclude them from my next study? All of these strategies are around risk mitigation. And ultimately, everything that we do in the Medidata platform is about optimizing outcomes in life sciences. Can we deliver the most valuable therapies to patients throughout that therapeutic life cycle? Can we make them as specific as possible? Can we identify who should and who shouldn't take our drugs and when? Can we optimize the value to our corporations that we work for from a commercial perspective? Ultimately, this is the job of all of us in the room. So with that, you now, I hope, understand a lot more about Medidata's strategy. We are really trying to deliver the intelligent platform for the next generation of life sciences companies. And I can tell you that the reason I'm here, the reason I'm so excited to be here, the reason that we've made such a big investment in the South Korean marketplace is because I know that some of the most important and successful life sciences companies of the future are represented here in this room today. It is our privilege to be able to work with you. Thank you very much.